Ladies, very honored to have you here, very distinguished panel. I guess most of you know them all. Welcome to all our partners in crime, indeed, and all the other very important persons, but a very special welcome to all the others. You are our very, very VIPs, because we organize these debates for you, and I'm very happy to see so many young people here. As the ambassador said, we call these events Erasmus Open Forum, named after Erasmus, just like this building. Erasmus lived 500 years ago. He was kind of the founder of humanism, standing for tolerance, openness, freedom, individuality, respect, all that kind of things, rationality. And we'd like to continue his legacy here with open debates. Everybody can come, everybody can join. So a lot of time will be for the questions and answers after our panelists have spoken. So please be prepared to give your opinion, because I just might walk up to you and ask you directly. So jangan malu-malu. And kalau bahasa Inggris sedikit sulit masih, tidak apa-apa, boleh dalam bahasa Indonesia, ya? We manage. So, shall we just start? And all this is not presentations, or we just do a few questions, be quick. I will cut everybody off who will speak too long. It's zero discrimination today. I will cut everybody off, so be aware of that. So if you want to say something, do your message or your question at the start. So we already have that one. Okay, let's start. Well, quite a few. Right, Riri from Komnas Perempuan, may I start with you? Ibu Riri has been an activist for 15 years, right? Something like that, before you came to the, well, quite a career in that. If I may ask you, we just, you know all the topics, of course, that we will discuss. We just saw this great video. It was very informative, but I was a bit puzzled by some of the statements, like over the last few years, there have been passed discriminatory policies aimed at disciplining women. Disciplining women, what's going on? Can you explain?
Okay, thank you, Prof. Roel. But first of all, I would like to acknowledge all the panelists, a very great panelists here, with the ambassador and also colleagues and friends. I saw a lot of very familiar faces for me. Many of them are actually my seniors. So it's a bit shocking for me to sit here. Okay, regarding to your question about discriminatory by law, the word discipline is a bit too hard to say, but basically discriminatory by law that we, Komnas Perempuan, have been monitored for almost 10 years after the regional autonomy policies, that the regional laws that aims to restrict women's mobility in the name of certain interpretation of religion and also certain moral standard. So this, as you see in the picture, in the movie, that actually Komnas Perempuan documented 421 discriminatory laws across Indonesia, that mostly those laws related to, first is about criminalization of women. This discriminatory law related to, for example, the regional regulation on prostitution. That the content of the law is really targeted women. Yeah. So as a prostitute, so they are really vulnerable to be arrested by the Satpol PP or the regional police. And the second is the regional law that related to restriction of and controlling women's body. So for example, that like the obligatory of wearing hijab, for example. In Indonesia, we are not Islamic country, and you know that like wearing hijab or the obligation to wear hijab is actually it's not right that the state or the local leaders dictate women what should we wear. Yeah, so it should be voluntarily for women, and it's not right when it's dictated to women, especially the civil service, schools, state schools. I mean, if religious school is fine, but for the state schools. Yeah. So this the second category. The third category is about restriction of women's mobility. For example, like curfew for women, that women cannot work after 9 p.m. unless accompanied by their male workers. For example, recently, like in Kabupaten Veen in Aceh and Banda Aceh in some other places of Indonesia. And the last category is the restriction of freedom of religion and faith, especially directed toward religious minorities in Indonesia. So those discriminatory bylaws that we are documenting, and we see that actually behind this discriminatory law lies the politicization of religion that aims to, you know, for especially for local politicians to attract more votes from the people. Yeah.
We are living in times in which identity is very important, right? If we talk about women, which aspects would be very important in identity? Would that be class, economic, or would that be the gender aspect, or would that be culture, religion? What would be most important here in Indonesia now?
That's a very hard question actually, but you know, like for women, actually there is no single identity. Like every woman, they bear with multiple identity, yeah? Gender, race, ethnicity, there's always, you know, there is intersectionality between those identities. Yeah, so therefore, for example, like what we see in the movie, that actually there are groups of women that oppose the bill on sexual violence. They are women, and this bill is actually respond for the ground, especially related to the cases of sexual violence, that 97% are actually women and children. Yeah. So in terms of intersection between gender, class, race, even religious background, those identity will, you know, like directed women, will influence women what kind of position that I would take, for example, in the issue of sexual violence, for example. Yeah.
A very important aspect in this identity of women, I guess, is the role of the state. And I'm referring now to that book by Susan Blackburn, it was, I think, Gender and State in Modern Indonesia, which has as its thesis that it's still like, let's say, the Orde Baru idea of women as housewives, as mothers, which is this still prevalent here? And could you say that Reformasi has not yet done enough?
Yeah, I think, you know, like the remnant of Orde Baru, new order about the state of Ibuism, I think until now, like we are still struggling for that. Of course, after the reform era, there are a lot of changes about the role of state in constructing the women's identity. The state of Ibuism, like many activists have been struggling to challenge that issue, but I think until now, some women and even, I mean, like the government itself still, to some extent, hold that kind of egoism ideology. But of course, I mean, like feminist movement in Indonesia are already advanced, that challenging that women is not, that the identity of women cannot be confined within state of egoism, because not all women are actually becomes ibu, for example. So I think that the feminist agenda that we are putting forward right now is how actually the state should, give more space for women to construct their own identity, based on their own experience, their own struggles. Yeah, so the state of egoism is, is very much patriarchal construction that state actually want to control women, want to confine women only on certain rules. Yeah.
Thank you. So when it comes to women in society and politics, the Zaman Reformasi is not yet completed, right?
Yes.
Work to be done. Thank you. May I continue with Eva? You are also, let's say, a veteran activist, and also in Parliament, right? You've done a lot of work, but also in economics and development. You studied in England and in the Netherlands, which is always good, by the way. But one of the interesting things is that you really came from, let's say, grassroots. And what you always learn about Indonesian politics, it's good to be well connected, it's good to have money. We all don't have that, right? But somehow you can still get into Parliament. How did you do that? What is your secret?
I have secret to be shared. Yeah. I was already feminist before entering politics. So I know what to do. I have the concept of gender equality opportunity is here already in my back mind. So when I was benefited of the new election law, where they put quota, so every political party, I remember at that time, was struggling to find women. And because I was already active in women movement, so I was approached by the boss from BDIP and asked me to get in. And I managed to enter the parliaments, but somehow I found that because I worked very hard, I did some good things, and also it's prominent, and I can differentiate from my colleagues, male colleagues. So I come into the point because I'm not rich, I'm not from the strong family, so I must show that I have a good performance. And I think I remember I got awards many times, and also I was very active in media. So my party concluded, okay, I need this woman. So they put me in number 3, number 2, and I failed in 2014 because I didn't do any vote buying strategy. And my party somehow practiced affirmative also. So they called me back instead of a man who was above me, who's supposed to replace Ramono Anung, yeah? And because the party said, we need women, we need Eva, so they called me back. So somehow it's a combination between hard workings and also good performance and integrity, of course. And in politics, somehow you must maintain the good reputations and also integrity. That are the two things that.
Right. So merit-based also exists here. Yeah, but you have to be careful, because if you don't watch out, you can be out, like happened in 2014. But I guess that's in every career, right? So you always have to watch out. Did you feel supported by your party once you're in? And I mean, how is it to be in this male-dominated environment?
It's not easy because I've never got a high position in the and the faction, because I'm not belong to any faction, because this is the strategy I choose. I will somehow employ the merit system, but I have no godmother or godfather within a political party. So somehow, someday, I got sucked, but up until now, I always managed to come back. I work very hard. For instance, like there wouldn't be any public account committee if I didn't create it. So I started to Australia for three weeks, and then come back and managed to create this new badan, the new bodies within the parliaments. So I can say, there won't be this BAKN if I didn't do that. And also in budget, and also in legislature, it was a group of women in Commission 3 who really struggled to put LPSK, Lembaga Perlindungan Saksi dan Korban, victim and witness protection. I worked with Nur Sabani at that time, only 3 women in the commissions. I want to make sure that women get access to this bill, because in the first draft, it's only meant for protecting the witness and victims of corruption cases. There is no way that women's there. But even though we are small numbers, but we are really persistent and we are stubborn, and finally, this law had somehow open access to women. And we are right, because up until now, the women's, the victims of domestic violence who are really dominated this law,
So
not the corruption.
You said in that commission there were only 3 women,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
From different parties, I guess.
Yes.
So they are really working together. So when it came to that issue, gender was more important than party politics, right?
I think so, yes.
Do you see that often in Parliament in Indonesia, or was it just on this issue?
I must admit here, I really enjoyed the first terms of my service here. At that time, using the 2004 bill, there were many activists could manage to get in the politics. But once the Constitutional Court agreed to adopt the open list system, it's only the rich, it's only the big guys who can enter. But when it was the closed systems, it's really friendly to women. It's really friendly to the activists here, but it's no longer there now. So I was benefited. Why I can maintain here or in the parliament? First, it was because there is a quota, but the second, because there is a closed system. When it was open systems, I was already inside the parliament, so I have modalities. But if there's now, suppose I'm a new guy come in with using this existing law, it wouldn't manage, because my background is ASN, the civil service. I teach in the university with a low salary. So there is no way right now to enter the politics using this open list system.
Thank you very much. Let me get to a international view on that. We got just free seating here, so I have to figure out a bit. But Marina, welcome, Ambassador of Sweden to Indonesia. As Ambassador Swartbol and myself already said, the Netherlands is not a front runner on this issue. Well, not at all. I guess we're somewhere in the middle, right? But at the top, I'm sure the Scandinavian countries are. Can you explain a little bit the situation in Sweden before you return to Indonesia back? And you know, if you know a little bit of history, in the history of Sweden and Scandinavia, we in Holland were quite scared of the big Vikings coming over. I mean, it was a very rude, male-dominated society. And what is it now, Marina?
We're still very scary. No, thank you. So interesting to listen to you. Even if gender issues are more or less the same, it's very hard to relate to specific Indonesian circumstances, of course. But in general, I would say we face the same obstacles. First of all, let me just inform you about Sweden and Swedish politics. For more than 4 years now, we have a feminist government. But that doesn't mean that we haven't had feminist policy for more than 4 years. We have had it for decades. But we still face obstacles. So don't believe, even if we are top ranking, when it comes to gender equalities, we are still facing problems, yes. And right now we have a feminist government and a feminist foreign policy. And the feminist foreign policy is built on two assumptions. And that is, I think, assumptions that can be shared between many countries. The first assumption is that cultural factors and historical factors, traditions, create the political environment. And then, if actually discrimination, as you explain it, is a norm, then not even the best laws, regulations, or even conventions would help to combat gender inequalities. The second assumption, I would say, is that gender equality, it doesn't happen by itself. Gender equality, no matter in which country, will be the result of political hard struggle and work. Progressive political reforms, and cooperation, not least, between the public sector, the private sector, cooperation between the public and private sector and civil society. The whole society must help each other. Gender equality is not about women. It's about democracy, it's about rights and justice. And what we need is, no woman needs to be given a voice. We already have voices. What is needed is more listening. So those are the assumptions and the platform on which we start. And still, we struggle on these assumptions and in these assumptions and on these platforms. And the feminist foreign policy is built on how do we combat the obstacles? How do we create a better environment by combating the obstacles? And for that, the 3 R's were sort of identified. The 3 R's stands for rights, representations, and resources. And it's quite simple. One wouldn't think it's not simple to handle, but we have to handle it. The rights is as easy as, it's about something as simple as the right not to be a gift, the right to education, the right to open a bank account, or to carry out economic activities. Representation is about giving women a voice. And then resources is about what does the government spend the resources on? You have to always ask the question, when you have a policy decision, how does this combat inequality? How do you reach women and girls with this decision? And it's actually 2 areas within the government policy that is very important when it comes to resources. And that is family planning, family issues in general, and the second thing is education.
May I ask, because women are much more visible, influential in Sweden now than they used to be, right? And how far have you changed culture in Sweden, the values of Sweden? I mean, it's not just 1 or 2 iron ladies, I mean, it's all of you together. And that So how has it changed Sweden?
We still have a far way to go. I mean, a bit way to go, not far, but we have still some norms to handle. It is all about norms. And to come, I mean, if I relate to myself as a mother, how do I raise my children? I have a son and I have 2 daughters, and every time I have to remind myself to treat them the same, to make sure that they are being brought up the same way, giving the great opportunity for my boy to understand that women is not an object. Women and men are supposed to be looked upon equally. It's how about you treat and respect one another. But how is it is in general in Sweden? It differs a lot, of course. But gender equality, I would say, when it comes to the young generation, it's very promising because they don't look at gender issues as being a female or male. Gender issues is not about sexes.
So that what we could say typical female issues like health and children and so on, are they being dealt with by men as well in Sweden now?
Yes, definitely. Well, just to go back to politics, what we need is political reforms, massive political reforms, and we still have to work with those kind of reforms to make society equal in Sweden. And when it comes to family planning, for instance, we have had several different political reforms in Sweden when it comes to parental leaves, for instance, which is very important to make it possible to women to work. And the ambassador said, Rob, before that, the question you ask women when they work is, how can you cope? Because you have children, don't you? And that question you would never get as a man. But it's starting to change in Sweden. It is, really. And that is because men are actually taking the responsibility of their children, and they are taking the responsibility of taking care of their homes. And that wouldn't have happened without political reforms.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm sure there will be many questions from the audience about the situation in Sweden. We can take that later. Thank you for the moment. Sarah,
yes,
you are the youngest here. That's not why you are last in line.
No,
maybe
no,
it has to
I'm
do
very
with
happy to go last.
maybe some secret norms within my head. Unconsciously, sorry for that. You were very young in politics. I think you entered at 28. I mean, why would somebody at 28 go into politics? What motivated you? I could think of much nicer
I'm out of my
things.
mind. I have no
You're out of
idea.
your mind.
No, well, first of all, it wasn't a political decision. I think that needs to be made clear. It wasn't that I was interested in politics at all. I think a lot of people, when they read about my background, they know who I am, whose daughter, whose niece. Automatically they think, oh, it's the family who wants her to go into politics. Oh, it's a political thing. But it wasn't. It really wasn't. And my family was actually shocked that I decided to go into politics because my background wasn't in politics at all. It's actually in filmmaking, as an actress. And so when I decided to go into politics in the terms that, as a member of parliament, as a representative, it was because of God's calling and because I was an activist for women and children, specifically for anti-human trafficking. So it was a decision where I realized if I remain an activist outside of the system, then it would be like a dog barking from the outside. But, just to put the perspective. But to go into politics, I was hoping that I could make some changes from the inside.
So who is now most shocked? Your environment by what you are doing, or you about the system?
Oh, wow.
I mean, you're now you voluntarily entered
Yes.
into
Yes.
male-dominated
Absolutely.
system, like you're in Commission 8,
Eight.
right? Dealing with what we call female issues, I mean, social, chill, whatever. And what are your experiences there?
Well, when I first entered, my first day of being sworn in, we also had to choose our Speaker of the House, etc. And that was the first time I ever witnessed. I said, did I enter into politics, or is this, I called it Raguna, as in the zoo. Because, until 3 a.m., until 4 a.m., we were trying to vote and decide on who's going to be Speaker of the House, and you weren't in at that time. So, yeah, it was very new for me. Whether or not it's male-dominated, I think I will mainly focus on my commission. It's a very interesting commission because even though the issue of women and children is in that commission, but we're also the commission that deals with social affairs and religious affairs. So most of the people, the representatives who are put, I think why I say put is because I am quite confident in saying that I'm probably the only member who asked to be put in the 8th Commission. Because the 8th, in our parliament, DPR, we have what's called the Water Source Mata Air Commission, the Water Source Commission, or the Tears Commission, Air Mata. So it's whether or not you have a lot of projects to give out, to hand out to your constituents, or it's zero. And 8th Commission is more of the pemadam kebakaran, it's the fire putting it, where we're the commission that puts out the fire, basically. And not many people want to be put or assigned in the 8th Commission. And the 8th Commission deals a lot, and I said with the religious affairs, it's also to do with the Hajj and Umrah. And so we have a lot of religious personalities, tokoh-tokoh, that are in my commission. And so when we're talking about women and children, you can't not talk about religion and ideologies. And so that's what we're dealing with. And she mentioned earlier about the sexual violence eradication bill. I think a lot of the times we get questions, why is it so difficult, or is it difficult to discuss that? Why is it taking so long? So and I have to be honest about this, it's not necessarily about gender. A lot of the times people think it's because they're male, they're men. It's not really. And I've seen this, and I'm sorry to say, I've had bad experiences even with fellow parliamentarians, fellow representatives who are female, who are women, who have no idea at all about female issues. And I've had to
Why is that?
hit my head a few times.
Is that because they have the Pembantus?
No, not necessarily. Nothing to do with that. Actually, it's to do with our political system. And I'll explain. I think it's to do with our political system. And I'm sorry to say, I'm one of those now in the younger generation. I'm not necessarily saying that the affirmative action it's a question mark right now. Why? Because if we push for the 30% and yet we still have the current electoral system, it's not going to work. Because, she mentioned about the open system. Open system, how then anybody can go into parliament, and it's a good thing, but the negative aspect of that means that most likely it's people who have money. Okay, so when we're talking about why are women it'd be three things: the political aspect, the fact that when we were discussing the Undang-Undang Pemilu, the election laws, we were trying to pass for, okay, if not 30% seat, fine, we still have the 30% caleg candidates, but can we push further than that? And at that time, Gerindra, because I was one of the most outspoken, members in my faction. I pushed for us to fight for 30% dapil, electoral districts, to have the number one in each faction, women. Because we have the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of each faction running in that district. And we were hoping that if we were running as number 1, it would help. But unfortunately, only 4 parties, only 4 factions agreed to it. 6 did not. And I'm pretty sure my colleague, Ibu Eva, was probably one of the ones pulling her hair because her faction wasn't one of the ones who supported that. And so this is a fact. It's the fact that we have a lot of the members of parliaments who are in power. They would not want to let go of the number 1 position when they're running. And most of them are male, obviously. We only have 17% female right now. So politics. Number 2 is economy, because the way it is right now is open, free for all. And that means that if we don't seriously discuss the issue of money politics, paying for votes, this issue will keep on happening. This will stay the status quo. Those who have money will be the ones who will be elected. And I am one of the very, very few, and I can honestly attest to this in my district. In the past, I just changed to a new district now. In Jawa Tengah, in Central Java, I was probably one of the, counting by hand, who did not do money politics. I know of incumbents who handed out 100,000 rupiah in their envelopes during the final days before election.
Well, we are now getting into Indonesian politics.
Yeah,
we
have to be honest about this.
Thank you. Well, it's women and politics, right?
Yes. And the third thing, of course, is culture. We still have a very patriarchal culture in Indonesia.
Thank you, Sarah.
And I can keep on talking tomorrow, but I know you're giving me the sign that I need to stop talking.
I know, but I promised that I would now turn to the audience and see what the questions are. And you can ask a question directly to somebody. You can be a more general question. We can take a few, and then I see hands. Maybe I can get some support with microphones. Please. Well, I can't say that lady because most are ladies. Please go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Devi Syatori. People know me I'm a politician from Nasdem Party. This is my question about women, because what I see about the quality of Indonesian women is very low in interpersonal skills and also in leadership. I never see the progress from the parliament to raise up the quality of Indonesian women. Maybe this is the opinion to both of you in parliament. Maybe you can make some program to raise up the quality of Indonesian women. But
okay.
It's my question. One of my questions.
We start with the questions.
Sorry, I'm a politician. Always talk for long.
Yeah. Okay, but not here. What is the question?
My question is what is your solution about the exclusive women in Indonesia? They force the woman must wearing the hijab, wearing the gamis, but I believe the quality of woman not depend on the hijab, but depend on maturity.
Questions. What shall we do? The other way around now. I start with you, Sarah. We just do the other way around.
Some of the questions actually relate to one another, especially as to do with the political education of women. So I will try to answer that first. Bu Dewi kalau nggak salah ya, the first one. There is actually a program by Kementerian Pemberdayaan Perempuan Perlindungan Anak, the Women Empowerment and Children Protection Ministry. However, the budget is very small, and every year it goes down and down and down and down. Even though we try to say you need to bring it up, you need to bring it up, but the argumentation since 2014 is that their ministry is only in cluster 3, third cluster, which means that they are a coordinative ministry, not a technical ministry, which means it was that excuse that the financial ministry and Bappenas has when they say that they cannot raise up the budget, okay, because it's a trilateral meeting. Then they take it to us, the DPR. But by the time it comes to DPR, by the time it comes to us, it's already set. It's very difficult to change it. Okay, so the budget has gone down from, we raised it up twice, we raised it up in 2015 to 1 trillion rupiah, in comparison to, by the way, 22 trillion rupiah for the Social Affairs Ministry. Now it's gone down to 500 billion rupiah only for this year. And so...
Sarah, we do 1 minute each.
And there's no way I can get it. Okay.
No, that's fine.
I'll try.
No, just pick one thing.
So that's to the first question. There is program, but when we told them that you need to be more specific about who you actually give the trainings to, because they do have a program for training women to give political education, but they don't work together with the political parties, where we are the ones who do kaderisasi. We are the ones who actually put forward the names for members of parliament, and yet they don't work together with us. That's right.
No,
and then
I just changed the rules.
Okay, we changed.
We do the question we like best. This was your question. No, that's okay. We do another round. Marina, thank you.
The question raised is not really questions that I can answer, but still I would like to come back to the 3 R's, because what we are talking about is really rights, representations and resources. So if you can stick to that in politics, to think of political reforms in these 3 areas, you will come quite far.
Thank you.
Come a long way, yeah.
Eva?
Yeah, actually, I'm really concerned about the education system, our education systems. Whereas the education systems didn't create very critical students, and now we are witnessing how the Hawks issues are attacking everybody. The high ranks people, high ranks pejabat, authorities, and also women. And why is that? I think somehow now we must understand that we must do some things on our education systems. And second, it's not really transformative contents, and also it's not very progressive curriculum and etc. So it's very easily to be deceived, easily to be manipulative and etc. Manipulated. And the basic obstacles for women to be very active somehow is the imaginations. If women agree that you must follow the dictations of the society, then you better not to do anything in politics. But if you disagree with, this dictations of society is not good, it's very put women in subordinate, then you do politics because you want to change. But the imagination of women is really the basic obstacles. If you agree that you are second class, then we will witness how women to campaign for polygamy and also against the RUU PKS and etc. So there is a big things to be done for women themselves.
Thank you.
I will answer the question about regional bylaws. Yes, Ibu, that after the decision of the Constitutional Court that now the Interior Ministry can now revoke the law, that one way to revoke the law is that we should go to Supreme Court. And there's a problem in the Supreme Court because judicial review there is not as open as in the Constitutional Court. So it means that we just submit berkas or document. So Komnas Perempuan already have 2 experience to do judicial review on the 2 discriminatory bylaw in one from Bantul and the other is the prostitution law from Tangerang Selatan that create their wrongful arrest of women because they are considered as prostitute. But unfortunately, because the system in our Supreme Court is not as open as the Constitutional Court, so we fail to do that. So what we are doing right now is on the prevention level. So Komnas Perempuan and the Interior Ministry with the Kumham and also the Ministry of Women and Children Protection, now we create what we call task force on the prevention of discriminatory bylaw right now. So this is one way to actually giving a solution for especially the local district, that you have to be really careful in drafting the policy. You cannot contradict to the higher law, even to the constitution. So this is one way to do. And I think the second one is what I want to highlight here about the politics of present for women. I think you might know about this term, that the presence of women, representation of women in politics means that those women actually, we put hope on those women to actually also voicing a women's issue. Yeah, but as Sarah said, that even though actually not all women actually understand about the women's issue. So I think this is very important for the women parliamentarian who have good understanding of women issue to coach your female fellow actually in the parliament about the issue. And the second one is the politics of presence is not enough without the politics of awareness. So it means that you become the member of parliament, that you have to relate yourself to a certain group to fight for their right, to fight for gender equality, to fight for women issues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So you have to be a teacher as well.
Can I add one sentence?
Yeah, this is a debate, so we can go, we can respond to what she said. I got 2 sentences there. First was Maria and then Eva, yes.
Well, what I can hear is that women in politics in Indonesia need support. And perhaps it's not possible to get enough support within your political parties or within the parliament. Then, just to share one of the key things in Sweden when it comes to political reforms, without a very lively civil society and close contacts between the politicians and the civil society and all other organizations, networkings, there wouldn't have been any political reforms. So decrease the gap between politicians and the civil society.
And civil society, that means you. Eva?
Yeah. I'm the secretary of Sekolah Partai, party school, and because I'm feminist, so I integrated feminism in the curriculums. That's to answer the questions. So I guarantee that every cadre in PDIP knows about gender equality concept, and we do some works on it. Second, about the local regulation that must be in line with the constitutions. After the decree from the Constitutional Court, somehow the internal minister now have new rules that every draft of the local regulations must be consulted to the Kanwil Hukum to make sure that the contents must be in line with it before going up to the minister, because the minister can no longer have authority to dismantle it.
Thank you. We go to the second round. Can I?
Can I?
The first one. No, in the second round. We're doing the second round.
Because then you're going to cut me off after I try to answer the second one.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, good morning to all. Thanks for the invitation and thanks for a very insightful panel discussion and some information on all issues surrounding women. My name is Salmai Wafam. I'm the Charge d'Affaires of Afghanistan here to Jakarta. Sarah, you earlier said that there are many women who don't understand the problems of women. Are you serious? Because if they're women, they do understand them. Or is it the party politics that influence their decisions and their actions over there? Because party politics could.
Thank you.
Cooperation between meetings, sometimes of parliamentarians from Indonesia, especially the males, to meet the parliamentarians in Sweden. Perhaps there should be a program, regular program, and women of course too. That would be perhaps helpful, the 3 hours. Thank you very much.
Help from the Swedes. All right. Yeah, in the back. Okay, and then I continue. Well, I know you.
Yeah, of course, because I'm working here. My name is Indi, I'm working at Nubik Neso, and I'm also activist in a political party in Golkar. So I don't have any question, I just have a statement that I don't feel any discriminated in women, and I see there is an obstacle for women entering the politics. And what I see is we as a woman actually have a lot more than a man. For example, there is a regulation 30% for women, there is no regulation for men. And for women, for example, we can have a special parking lot, but there is no for men. And also in the train or in the bus. So I think we as a woman, like having this seminar, feel weaker than a man because it feels like that we would like to have TV, but yeah, maybe this out of context, but I see an obstacle as long as the women has the will and the women would like to leave this comfort zone. I know Sarah is laughing. That's because you said that there is a woman who doesn't know their problem. I know that maybe I'm one of them, I don't know, but yeah, that's my opinion.
Okay, thank you. There was one here.
I'm from Community Legal Aid Institute. I want to ask you a bit. Just like Ambassador said, if you want to fight the gender and the stigma and the stereotype, it's like a dog barking if we fight it from the outside. So the strategic way is we fight it and we face it from the inside. But I want to ask how to encourage the young generation or young women to enter the political. But like Sarah said, it was an open opportunity. So just the people who with money who can enter and who can elect it in the political. So yeah, what is the strategic way in this condition? Thank you.
Untuk Mrs. Mariana. Marina. Berkaca dari yang terjadi di Swedia perihal gender equality di tempat kerja, workplace, ada saran-saran nggak bagaimana perempuan atau bahkan ya perempuan dan laki-laki di tempat kerja bisa lebih meningkatkan gender equality itu? Apakah harus bergabung di parpol atau kayak mereka berserikat sesamanya gitu? Praktisnya, realnya. Terima kasih.
I will translate for Ambassador Marina. So reflecting from the Swedish experience, particularly about gender equality in the workplace, do you have any inputs or suggestion how women could have her voice more heard in the workplace? Do they have to join political parties or make union, or do you have any suggestions?
My question is addressed to Ibu Marina, the Swedish ambassador to Indonesia. You talk about the feminist government and feminist foreign policy. What does it mean that feminist foreign policy and government, and what is the betterment feminist approach compared to non-feminine approach in the government or in the politics? Thank you.
You continue where you were.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'll just give me a bit more time because I think there are some very, very important issues that needs to be addressed here. Number one, if we're talking about women for women, I think one of the biggest is to go back to the earlier question, what's the biggest obstacle? A lot of the times, and this I think is everywhere around the world, but here in Indonesia, we still have a problem where women are not necessarily for women. Through my experience, when I was running in 2013, did a survey, just like most most people running for office, and the survey came back that even the women in my district would not vote for women to be in office. So we had to work extremely hard, and I was very grateful that I wasn't the only one, that there were other women who were running in my district, and we proved everybody wrong. Because it started with just one seat, and that was a leftover seat that was held by a woman out of the 7 seats in my district. Now it's 4 out of the 7 are women. So the surveys are not always right. However, are all those women who understand the issues? And what we mean by that is, even though they're women, they don't necessarily have the understanding that it is still very difficult for women to voice their concerns, to say that, for example, running at that time, I was still not yet married. Now that I'm married and with 2 children, it's very different. I have to leave behind my 2 children very young. I was pregnant and I was breastfeeding during this whole term I was in office. And it gives me a whole different perspective on what it means to be a working mom. Making the laws don't necessarily mean that they understand what it is that we are facing. Right? For example, very specifically, right now the law says that there should be no children present during campaigns. But what happens when we go to the desa-desa? When we go to the kampung-kampung? I'm not saying I disagree, but I'm saying, well, what about those women who are breastfeeding? Does that mean that they have to leave their children behind so that they can attend those sessions to get political education? If I were still breastfeeding right now, it means that I have to leave my child behind for the whole day that I'm going around. And I have to force my child to take from the bottle. My firstborn wasn't like that at all. He would not, he refused the bottle. So I was blessed enough, I was lucky enough to be able to take him to the office, but I have to make sure that my colleagues support, and thankfully, yes, they support, but would they support if they know that their own daughter is the one who's going to the office, and not everybody's as lucky as I am. So we don't have that in the workplace, where not every single working space have a breastfeeding area. Even that is something we need to fight for. For women who are breastfeeding, just very simple. And then when we're talking about women who are for women, it's because right now, because of the sexual abuse eradication bill, just to make sure that this is not a political issue, I will say that PDIP and Gerindra are like the 2 factions that are supporting this. It's a cross-cutting issue. It's not a political issue. But we do have members in the 8th Commission who are supporting what those who are basically protesting this bill. They're saying, what is the feminist legal theory? We don't agree having the feminist legal theory in Indonesia. They are saying that. And some of them, in both men and women, are even saying that maybe we should question human rights laws. Because the human rights laws that are in existence at the moment are not, they're very Western, they're not very Indonesian. Yes, and I've heard that coming from nationalist parties. I'm sorry, it's so easy to say that, oh, this must be from that party. No, I've heard it across the board. This coming from nationalist, religious, all across the board. There are those who really believe that. And they are in parliament at the moment. So, biggest obstacle is, yes, we need he for she, that's very much true, but we also need women who are for women. But let's not kid ourselves. Let's not say, we need 30% but without the training. We need to ensure there is political education to ensure that there are women who understand issues, who know what they're fighting for, and that we can say that they are for gender equality and for inclusivity, and not the other way around, and not just those women who are supported by so and so, and by big organizations or big money. They can go in, but they don't represent human rights or even gender equality and inclusivity.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. I think I must now turn to Marina, because what Sarah described, like if you have children and so on, how does that play out in Sweden? And you must explain to us what is a feminist policy.
Yes. Well, what you just told us about when it comes to having to bring your child to work goes very well in hand with the question raised about how do you make your workplace equal. So, as I said, it comes very much to rules and regulations, massive political reforms. And when it comes to family planning in Sweden, there is a very, very, very crucial thing, and that is parental leave. That has solved the problems for many Swedes and also raised the awareness about what gender equality is all about. But let me first state one thing, and that is gender equality, as I said before, is not about women, and it's not about men, it's about human rights. Don't ever forget that. And why do we need gender equality? That is also one thing that we have to remind ourselves about, and that is because it increases employment, it increases economic growth, it's good for your country. And to gain support, you have to gain support, of course, from women, but you also have to gain support from men. And that is, the crucial thing then is to explain for the society, for men in general, why it is good to have gender equality. And coming back to family planning and parental leave in Sweden, we have parental leave, we get 480 days of parental leave as a couple in Sweden. And
So that is how many weeks?
480 days. Days.
That would be...
480 days.
Yeah, we're all counting now. That's more than a year, right?
That's more than a year. Yes, but listen, the most important thing about this is that it can be shared equally between the father and the mother.
Yes.
And 90 days of the 240 days being for the dad, but 90 days of those 240 days has to be taken out by the dad. It cannot be transferred to the mother. So that makes it possible for women to stay in the workforce. So that is the crucial thing, and the main thing, how we make the working place being gender equal and equal. There are, of course, other things as well, making the working place gender equality, but just one thing, and that it's about ethic rules. It's about non-discrimination laws.
Right. It's okay. Maybe you will do what is feminist policy later. Yeah. Maybe you can say in one or two lines.
Feminist policy, let me say feminist government. What is that? That is about enlighten the society, enlighten men and women what is the advantages of gender equality. And what it means in practice is that when policies are made, you have to put a gender perspective on every single decision. How does it fall out? How does this policy operate? Or how will it be transformed in practice? How does it mean that women will have the same equal opportunities as men if we decide about this policy? Those questions are raised by the Prime Minister of Sweden every time he makes a decision.
I take it the Prime Minister is a lady? No? No? So, very good. So,
his name is Stefan Veen.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Shall I, Riri and then Eva, but if you do it not too long, then I can take a third round. Yeah?
There will be a third round.
Depends on you.
Okay.
Yeah, a fast one.
Yeah, I just want to comment about that many women do not support women. But I don't want to put, like, victimize women, you know, because this is also result of the gender construction that, you know, for example, that the public sphere is actually not suitable for women. Yeah, even some years ago, there is a big debate: can women become a president of Indonesia? So I think, yeah. So I think this is also the result of, you know, the patriarchal cultures that embedded in our society for generation to generation that actually create the perspective of women that it's not right for women to actually run for office. Yeah, and a lot of stereotyping, and also, you know, even the stereotyping about career women and how they manage, you know, the double burden of women. Yeah, so I think these kind of factors that actually make women then they feel reluctant to actually support women because of those kind of like stereotyping, gender equality, and also very dominated male perspective. Just that.
Thank you, Eva.
Thank you. I think I want to continue with Ms. Marina has mentioned before. Yeah, for the affirmative actions, somehow we must pick up the right systems of election. There is no way if you go and pro for the quota, but then you agree with very unfriendly election systems. What I mean is like in Sweden and also in Scandinavia and other countries, they employ closed system. So the young can come, the poor can come, also the representative of the labor can come. But not like this. It's very open, but then it's very high cost. So for the questions related to the how to encourage young people to come to the politics, somehow the system of elections, we must reform it. And second, we must use the definitions of politics. The politics is really a noble way because it solves the problem of society. So the politics is not the dirty words, it's not the hard words or violence word. It's a noble way. It's supposed to be a noble way that can take you to the heaven, actually. That's, I think, somehow we must reform also our understandings of politics.
Thank you very much. I never thought of it like that, but
We have a very lively Swedish parliament when it comes to international cooperation. And we have, of course, groups going to different countries, working together with other parliamentarians in different countries. I don't know if there is a set or fixed cooperation between Indonesian parliament and Swedish parliament. I don't know. But then we fix that.
Okay. Afterwards, you can have a word, I mean, if you're on the front 2 rows, you can have a word with the panelists, and otherwise you have to get the answers among yourselves. Yeah, please, Davy.
Okay.
Questions, because we still got a lot of hands.
Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for, I appreciate you brought up the issue about breastfeeding, because I bring my daughter here and I breastfeed, and I want to be educated in politics. Okay. I do believe that a better access to education would facilitate girls to become more aware of the problems that women are facing, and in the end, increase their involvement in policy making in politics. But on the contrary, the strong current wave of Sharia laws that discourage women to pursue education and to marry at a young age, and still many ethnic groups in Indonesia practice child marriage in remote areas. How do our women representative in the parliament deal with that? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I must ask the name. This is the youngest debater we had in the Erasmus House. Hi. Kabar. Oh, malu. Oh, No, I go to this side. Sorry, Mom.
Good morning, ladies, dear panelists. My name is Veen and I just have one question. Would you agree that the key factors, one of the key factors to increase women participation in politics is reform within the political party itself? And secondly, whether the political party leaders need gender training, because in my experience, they are not necessarily ignorant, but they are gender blind.
Thank you. Go ahead there, right?
Thank you. I have actually two points to be raised. One is I'm kind of uneasy if talking about women representation is only talking about the election system, actually. If we study about the election system, both closed or open system actually have problems. In the case of Indonesia, it's very unfortunate. We are not really much discussion about the problems of political parties here. I believe that one big obstacle for women entering politics and participate substantially in parliament as well as political parties, problems of political party. And is there any reforms in political party like Veen just raised before? Is there any policy of internal quota in the political party? If every political party adopt internal quota, it would be fine with whichever election system we adopt. But the problem is not single political party want to have internal quota in the party for women. That's one issue. The other issues is about the women's movement. If we are talking about the affirmative policy, actually this is a policy that was advocated by women's movement right after elections, supported by women and then adopted into the law, elections law and political party law. Now after 15 years, is it getting difficult to raise the issues of women in politics among women movement? What was the problem? We have to make a self-reflection about women in politics, actually. This is just two issues that maybe we can share together, and we want to have a response from the audience.
Perempuan disabilitas, yang ingin saya tanyakan, apakah perempuan disabilitas mampu masuk dalam politik perempuan, terutama di Indonesia? Terima kasih.
Wiratma from Formapi. I apologize. I will speak in bahasa Indonesia. Pertanyaan saya, masih relevankah afirmasi untuk perempuan? Sebab Konstitusi Indonesia menyatakan, khususnya pasal 27 ayat 1, segala warga negara bersamaan kedudukannya di dalam hukum dan pemerintahan. Jadi perempuan, laki sama. Nah, menurut saya yang penting itu adalah memberdayakan orang-orang yang tidak berdaya. Sekarang banyak loh laki-laki yang juga tidak berdaya. Jadi perlu juga mendapat afirmasi gitu. Oleh karena itu saya menyesalkan kalau di negeri ini ada Kementerian Pemberdayaan Wanita Perempuan. Mestinya Kementerian Pemberdayaan Rakyat. Jadi rakyat manapun yang tidak berdaya harus diberdayakan sehingga bisa berkompetisi baik di dalam pemerintahan maupun dalam politik. Terima kasih.
My name is Carol and I'm from the Embassy of Ireland. And most of the discussion and the questions here have been around political structures, political strategies, political will. But we're forgetting about the massive exercise that needs to take place in acknowledging that A, politicians won't do anything unless the electorate demands it, and B, what do we do to convince the public in general that this is actually a serious problem, that things are not okay despite your own individual circumstances. And if they were, we wouldn't have an International Women's Day still going, and we definitely wouldn't have a Women in Politics seminar. So I was just wondering, what are your thoughts to convince the wider population, not just in Indonesia, and I'd love to hear about how it's being done in Sweden. I know in Ireland it's still an issue. We introduced gender quotas a couple of years ago. They're beginning to work. The public is gradually beginning to see the useful and benefit of this, but there's still a long way to go. Politicians won't move unless the people want them to. So how do we convince everyone else that this needs to be done? Thank you.
The problem, what is actually the problem regarding the laws of underage marriage? Because it's taking so long to reform it. It's been since 74, I think, the laws, and the parliamentarians say that it's taking like 3 years to reform it. Why does it take so long to reform the laws? Thank you.
I think I want to respond to Mbak Ani. I think there are two choices. You want to take slow or low speed of achieving equality participations in the parliaments, or you take high speed or bypass. So we can put Scandinavians as a natural way, or Latin America as a bypass way. In the bypass way, we can choose two options. Either you take the reserved seat, or you choose the closed system of elections. So it really depends on us which way we will take. For me, I think I want to speed up the increase of participation of women in the parliaments. So if you go for the affirmation, there are these options. You cannot just say, oh yeah, I pro for the quota, but the system and the elections must be free. So you must fight. Cannot go like that. Okay. And second, I think I want to respond to the questions about sorry. Okay. And I think it's about about the youngs, how to get in. But the ambassador of Cuba just left. When I visited Cuba, I met several MPs who are 23, and it's under 30. And when I asked, how come you can enter the politics? Well, it's open for everybody. So you can enroll yourself to the political party, what the party is one, yeah, of course. But it's open, it depends on the society. So they don't have any issue on the high cost of politics. I think this we need to have that kind of systems for the young people with fresh idea and also with the new enthusiasm and etc. I'm really concerned with the young and women, of course. Women's there, like in also in East Timor now, they have about 46% within 15 years after the independence. They just can't go because the system of elections.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, the question raised from the Irish embassy, we could spend hours discussing that. It's a question with so many dimensions, but let me just try to summarize it from a Swedish perspective. How do you create awareness? How do you make people understand what would be the gains if we have gender equality, and what would be the disadvantages if we don't reach gender equality? But how do we make society change? It's about education. It's basic education, and also when it comes to the single micro level as a family, be a role model as a mother, as a father, as a human being. and be the change you wish to see. Somebody said that. Told me it was Gandhi saying that, but I think it was a woman. Be the change you want to see. Very simple, but it's also very complicated, of course. But you also have to show what would be then the disadvantages if you don't reach gender equality. And it often comes down to economic numbers and economic growth. So let me emphasize that gender equality is not a goal in itself. It's for reaching sustainable development, and it's an essential part of solutions to all the problems we face in the world. Not just in Indonesia, not just in Europe, not just in Sweden. The global challenges we face will be solved if we reach gender equality.
About the reflection of the women's movement. I think this is a very important issue that all the women's movement in Indonesia should really think about. But from my limited observation, that my experience working in Komnas Perempuan also, that I think there are some problems that now we are facing regarding to the women's movement. First is about that the women's movement in Indonesia right now is terpecah-pecah, I don't know how to say that, divided. I mean, like, yeah, many women groups, they are really caught up in their own issue. Yeah, so this is very difficult to actually to come together on the table to raise one single issue that all the women's movement are agreed to put as a priority. That's the first one. And the second one is actually the lack of resources. You know, Indonesia right now, especially the civil society organization, many of them are now getting less and less support because Indonesia is already considered as the middle income countries. That, you know, like the donors, the resource from the donors are decreasing right now. And also for the women's movement in Indonesia. We really experienced that many women crisis center, for example, they don't have any support to actually assist the victim of domestic violence, victims of gender-based violence, because they don't have any resource, be it from the government or from aids from donors. And the last thing, I think that there is a kind of, I'm sorry to say, dissatisfaction, keputusasaan or ketidakpuasan toward women in the parliament. Because, you know, Mbak Sarah and Mbak Eva is, you know, they are two champions that we ask for help in any issue to fight for women's issue in the parliament. We need more women like Mbak Sarah and Eva who really speak out and also fighting for gender equality in the parliament. And now we have like 101 women and only a handful of women that actually we ask for help for that. So I think this is also make and also create like women movement that they feel that they are putus asa ya, or tidak puas with the result of the women who are sitting in the parliament. And the second question is about the marriage law. This is the law that we are fighting, the revision of the law that we are fighting for many years. So if the Ambassador Marina said that we need political reform, Indonesia needs religious reform, especially relating to the marriage law. Because basically, those conservative religious groups that actually against the reform for our marriage law, for example, the issue of child marriage, the issue of polygamy within the law, and also the issue that women heading household, that women is the leader of the household. So even in the reality, actually, millions of women is actually heading the household. So the strong resistance is actually coming from those religious conservative group that they don't want to change the status quo, the privilege that they have to revise the law. So I think that's the biggest challenge. Thank you.
That it's, in this case, I disagree slightly because it's not always the religious conservative. what we think of as religious conservative parties. I have to be honest, and I've mentioned this before, those who actually think that the human rights laws need to be revised to be more Indonesian, they're across the board. They're in every party. And may I just remind everybody as well that yes, for the reform of the political parties, because it is not enough to have a handful of women who are fighting for these causes. Because we're only 2, 5, 10 against 550 who might not have the same views on gender equality and inclusivity. And when it comes to decision making, it is based on the parties. It is very rare for the voting to take place based on individual votes. It is only when it is very, very controversial. But when it comes to the bigger issues, most of them, especially when it comes to women and children, it is based on political party lines. And what takes place in Indonesian parliament is musyawarah mufakat, which means that it is not by vote. If one party disagrees, then you still need to talk about it. And it's always represented by the heads of the factions that makes the decisions. So yes, civil society needs to take a bigger role in convincing and in educating even our heads of factions and heads of parties. We need your help. It is impossible for just those of us. And the good thing about in politics, usually in society, being outspoken as a woman is not always positive. But in politics, you need to be outspoken. You need to be bow wow. Otherwise, they won't listen to you. So the last thing that I will touch on is about convincing the people and the young. Yes, education is key. And we need, this is across whoever's going to rule later, needs to have a commitment to do a reform of the whole education system. Because of the way we are learning now, it is not independent research. It is not research-based. It is all about, this is what the teacher knows and this is what you should know. We need to change that. And therefore, we also need to get the people to understand, the youth to understand that this is your future we're talking about. That if you do not choose the right people, whether in executive positions or in legislative positions, this is your future and your children's future and your grandchildren's future we're talking about. It is not just about 5 years from now, it's about 20, 30, 50 years from now. And that is something we still need to do every day as candidates, and we say that every single time. And when we're talking about money politics, we tell them, do you want to choose those who have money or those who have the heart for the people? But even that, they don't get. Most of them, especially in the desa-desa, they still, it's like, oh, are you here to give me money? And when I tell them I'm not here, I'm not bringing amplop, most of them would literally just be like, okay, fine, what are you here for? So education, it needs to be in the whole education system. It can't just be by politicians. So, and we need teachers, and unfortunately, corruption also exists in the education system. We have teachers who are cheating the system in order for their school to remain the same reputation and standard that exists. So again, maybe it's political will, maybe it's a combination of everything, but it needs to be everybody. And the last thing, women for women, we need to have, it's difficult for us representatives to represent a divided voice. Right now, especially when it comes to the sexual abuse eradication bill, it's everywhere. So when the women can't say what is important for us, then the men will definitely be divided on the issues. So that's the last. Thank you.
For some reason, the moderator has to sum up the thing, which is a bit silly because you listen to it just like I did. But anyway, what I got from it that you got still a big task, right? It's not just the politicians, but it's civil society. If you don't do anything, they will not do anything. Maybe apart from Eva and Sarah. But the others certainly won't. Then, important is, of course, as you all said, education. Emancipation is about enlightenment, right? Feminism is about enlightenment. And it already starts at home, in your family, raising up children. What are the values you give them? Just a very small anecdote from my own home. My mother used to be in politics for 20 years. She was the only woman in that village where I grew up in, among the men. And there was often talk about, as a woman, you have to do twice as much as a man to get the same result, or be twice as good. And then my mom always replied, fortunately, that is not so difficult. So, so that is about equality of women. Don't underestimate that.